Welcome to the Aaron Warner podcast on iCode Media. Today I've got two rock stars with me, Dr. Julio Echegoyen and Dr. Joe DeLoach. Almost a tongue twister, Joe. And so Julio and I work very closely together in San Diego. Julio is partner in Gordon Chanslin New Vision Institute, which is one of the refractive surgery centers that we work with. They've expanded certainly beyond what they had initially did in their offering. And then Dr. Joe DeLoach, everyone knows from Practice Compliance Solutions, PCS, is a recurring guest on the show because his insights into compliance and just how this game works are super important. But as we kick this off, Julio, I want to give everybody an opportunity to meet you. So give us a brief introduction.
Well, thank you, Aaron. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So, my name is Julio Echegoyen. Like you said, I'm an ophthalmologist in San Diego. I've been working in ophthalmology for 10 years. I'm actually originally from Central America and immigrated here when I was 16 and decided to go to med school like later in my life. So I'm a little bit behind the ball, but ended up liking ophthalmology, which is a great fit for me. It's an amazing field. And ended up in San Diego. I'm originally from LA. And everybody that comes to San Diego doesn't want to leave. So I decided to stay here and was very fortunate to join Gordon Chanslin in 2017. And it's been great since. It's a very refractive based practice. Mickey Gordon and David Chanslin have pretty much done LASIK on everybody in San Diego, and I mainly do a lot of cataracts, and it's been a great place to work. They're like pioneers in both LASIK and cataract surgery, and I couldn't be in a better place than this.
Yeah. Well, you're pretty humble, Julio. You've got some pretty neat things you brought into the practice as well. And but the most important question, I don't think I've ever asked you this. Being from LA, now San Diego, have you switched alliances? Are you a Padres fan?
Yes, actually,
Okay.
my friends give me a bunch of crap for it. Excuse my French. But yeah, I was, Dodger Stadium is not the safest place to go watch games, and here the stadium is so nice and so great that I just love it. I love going. We go twice a year, and one of my partners, David Geffen, who's also very well known,
Yeah.
has season tickets, so I get to mooch off of him whenever he needs a buddy, and he takes me down there.
So, yeah, it's a great stadium, and I hadn't asked you that. I want to make sure we could still be friends.
Yeah, not a Charger fan though.
Well, they left us.
Oh, I'm pissed off because I moved here, and the year I moved here, and I finally thought I would have a football team, they leave the same year. So, anyways, but
Well, so you were the bad luck that
yeah,
got rid of them.
I'm the guy.
Hey, we'll send you the Cowboys.
Well, we're getting a real football team. This
A real one, not the Cowboys.
real one, yes. We've got we've got
Oh, the soccer team.
the soccer team. Yeah, we've got the Wave in the NWSL
Yeah.
women's professional team, and then the men's MLS team is coming, San Diego FC. They were very creative on their naming, but this is their inaugural year, so we'll see how real football does in San Diego. Nice. And then Joe, I think we all know you, but for those who don't, let's real brief introduction.
Oh, gee. Yeah, it's certainly a commonly known name for one reason or another. Yeah, interesting. Julio probably doesn't know this, but I spent 20 years of my career in a ophthalmology center, much like where you work. It was very progressive, very optometry based. As a matter of fact, I think at the time we were probably the second largest referral center in the United States. About 95% of our patients came from optometry referrals. So I've also had the pleasure of coming and lecturing for you folks, and
Yeah.
I'm going to get to do that again in the spring, so we're excited about that. But somehow down the line, I detoured and became a healthcare compliance expert. And of all the people that have ever asked me why that happened, I still have no answer for it, other than I must have gone crazy at some point. Um, but
Somebody has to do it.
Somebody had to do it. That's really the only answer I've got. And I feel like we put something together that does it extremely well and very much focused on optometry, relations with optometry and ophthalmology, and the truth. And that's really where I've always wanted to take all this stuff because you said there's so much confusion out there, so much things that aren't true. So hopefully today we can at least clarify some of that stuff out.
Absolutely. Let's jump into it. And so the impetus for this discussion was a letter that was circulating around, and then questions that we get on how we can no longer co-manage refractive patients anymore, mostly cataract patients, was the basis of the letter. But that there's no more co-management, that co-management isn't financially viable for both parties. And the letter goes on and on. The point's not to drag on about the letter. The point was to say, let's have as Joe said, truthful conversation about co-management, how we take care of patients, how we refer back and forth, and what that relationship between optometry and ophthalmology should look like for the benefit of the patient, and then how we manage that in a compliant way, which I don't think is difficult to do. You just have to understand, as I like to say, the rules of the game. That way you can play the game appropriately. And Julio is one of the go-to surgeons in San Diego, certainly go-to surgeon for me in my practice. We've become very good friends because of that relationship that we have, and the openness and the dialogue and the communication, and the care that him and his team give our patients when we send them over, whether it's for LASIK or cataract surgery, refractive implants, or even some of the glaucoma cases that we've had to send over. That making sure that it works in a smooth way for the patient, so their experience is top notch. But also, whenever we do get audited, we just say, "Hey, here's the records, here's the charts. Have fun," because we know we did everything the right way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to harp on that letter either, but I do agree this whole thing spawned, I don't know, from the letter or from my 5-page rant that was generated because of the letter. But it was one of those days I'm glad I had extra blood pressure medicine because it really set me off.
Yep.
Yeah, it was very surprising to hear this. I'm assuming you're referring to that particular practice up North California who
Yep.
basically ended co-management.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that it's been kind of snowballing since that Texas practice got fined. What, 4 years ago? Or 3 years ago?
That theory.
3. And then they kind of just put a big, bad sign on co-management. But yeah, it was very surprising to see that letter, and we were all taken aback that harsh decision was made like that.
Yep. Well, let's dive into the how-tos of co-management, and then I think we can jump in from that over to how to make it work properly, because it is a very valuable relationship, especially for the patient ultimately, who's at the center of this care. So Joe, being the expert here, walk us through kind of the history of how we got to where we're at, and then where all the miscommunication, the misinformation comes from, and what we need to do.
Yeah. I love the history of how things happened, and I think, Aaron, you've heard this before, but co-management is kind of a made-up word. It really doesn't even appear in much of any of the history. I'm not sure how the word was made up, and I'll talk about why it's really not the correct word in a minute. But some of our leaders, almost 40 years ago now, went to Medicare and said, "Hey, this isn't right. We need a system where we can participate in the care of our patients post-operatively." And long story, but that generated the tenets of what CMS considered to be the way co-management should work. That was massaged a little bit by the American Academy of Ophthalmology, but not very much. Their standards and CMS's standards tend to go hand in hand. So it's pretty simple. I mean, and that's what baffles me about this whole thing, is it's just not complicated at all. It's just sometimes it's not what people want to hear. Well, welcome to compliance. Um, but it's pretty simple. The first one is it starts with Julio. Um, so the surgeon is the first one that decides if co-management is appropriate. And CMS says that can't be like, the practice's blanket policy. We just always send patients back. It actually has to be determined on an individual patient basis if that's best for the patient. Surgeon's the only one that can make that decision. Now, I can promise you that 25 years ago, I stood at the podium and said, by golly, if that surgeon won't send that patient back to you, you kick their down the road and go find somebody else. And that's really not appropriate whatsoever. And I never say that anymore because really it should be the surgeon that says, yes, it is appropriate to transfer the care, which is the correct term in this patient's case. The second person that decides if this is appropriate is the patient. So now the patient has to say, yes, I want my primary care optometrist to participate in my postoperative care. So now we've got two people in the way of me saying I'm going to do it. And it's not really in the way, it's just those are the two most important decisions right there. So once those two decisions say yes, then I actually have the same option as well because there's no law that says I have to co-manage patients. And I think that's one of the things I don't like about some of the stuff circulating is the name calling of, oh, you're not a real doctor if you don't participate in co-management, or you should be ashamed of yourself if you do or you don't. And really, each optometrist, that's their decision whether they want to do that or not. Once those three decisions are made, the process is very simple. And the tenets are everyone needs to set their own fees for their services, everyone needs to collect their own money for their services, and our medical record has to document the legitimacy of the money we received. That's really no different than any other service we provide as doctors. It's not just co-management. A visual field is exactly the same way. An office visit is exactly the same way. We have to set our fee, collect our money, and our medical record has to demonstrate that we actually appropriately earn that money. So why it's hard for some doctors to accept that that's the way that co-management works as well is kind of baffling because it's the way all of healthcare works. So that's it. I mean, got to have the surgeon approve it, patient wants it, I want to do it, and in that case, I set my fees, I collect my money, and I have to have good medical records.
That's very well said. Yeah.
We can get complicated on it later, Aaron, but that's the basic story right there.
So Joe, listening to you say that, is there any difference between that process of me referring a patient to any other healthcare professional, even within optometry, if I'm sending somebody over for vision therapy?
No.
Right. I have to want to send them to make the referral.
Right.
The patient has to accept the referral.
Right.
The referring doctor has to accept the referral.
Right.
Right. They set their fees. I'm not involved in that process.
No. No.
No.
And
then
honestly, the only difference that post-operative care poses in the whole relationship between any of us, between optometry and ophthalmology, between a cardiologist and a cardiovascular surgeon, or any other referral-based type situations, is money is what got in the way. Because that seems to be the whole focus on this thing. And the whole focus really is, I think, Aaron, you've already said about 4 times, what's best for the patient. And that's, I know our oath says that's the way we make a decision. And I'm pretty sure Julio's oath said exactly the same thing. That's why we're doctors. We're here to take care of our patient, not our bank account.
Yep.
Yeah, totally agree with all you said, and I mean, co-management I think is indispensable for today's world of eye care. It's just there's no way to really take care of all the patients in a proper way without co-management.
So, Julio, I'm curious because I've certainly sat in, as Joe, optometry meetings discussing this. In an ophthalmology meeting, with fellow refractive surgeons discussing this. What's the discussion there? What's the value or the discussion seen and shared with co-management amongst your peers in your meetings?
Yeah, basically, I see two camps, and they're divided by age. Basically, the older guys can be very resistant to co-management, and that's probably a traditional thing that there was an animosity in the past. And then as younger guys, I'm not too young, but as younger guys, we grew up with it, so we're very pro for it,
Yeah.
you know, and that's the main division. But that division is becoming less and less evident as more and more patients flood the market, and there's need for eye doctors. It's basically we're drinking out of a water hose when it comes to cataracts, over a fire hose, so to
Yeah.
speak. It's a lot. It's a lot of. I mean, you can't. Like I said, you can't really. There's not enough ophthalmologists to kind of do our job, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but when I look at a good surgeon such as yourself and the other surgeons on your team, a good surgeon should be in the OR, right? You should be not a mill. We're not just sending people through, right? You build a relationship with a patient, but that's where you practice your best tradecraft.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
And so I think that trying to maximize your specialty and keeping you where you operate best, no pun intended, or maybe pun intended, really is how this whole system works as efficiently as possible.
Yeah, I like to think myself. I'm not an athlete, but as a professional athlete, right? You don't want me benched,
No.
right, for a long period of time, because I'm gonna lose my feel. And the more you do, the better you get at it. The whole 10,000 hours kind of thing. Yeah, you want to be doing it all the time, because you do get rusty if you don't do it. But yeah, I mean, that's where I'm happiest. I love to do surgery. We also take care of patients, but it is great if I can just be in the OR cutting all day.
So when I look at my role is, before I send somebody over to you and decide to make that referral, is to prep the patient as much as possible for the experience they're going to have and the decisions that will be made between you and them on the final implant types and surgery type and whatnot. But my job is to get them as prepared as humanly possible before we send them over to you. That way you can pick up right where your job starts, and then once your job is over, transitioning the care back so that I can continue the care that we needed to. Honestly, I'm seeing this a lot more in retina as well with Nick London, right? We historically, and I agree with you on the age thing. You'd send somebody into retina and you lost the patient because they never came back. Well, now I'll send somebody over to Nick or Mike, and they've got a retinal hole, they've got proliferative diabetic retinopathy, whatever the case is that they need to take care of, and they do their job taking care of it. And when they're at a point, they're saying, okay, now we're back to the monitoring stage. I don't need to do any more surgery. I see that patient come back, and we just have that good communication between professionals, all focusing on the care of the patient.
Exactly, yeah. And I mean, in our office, we have 3 optometrists that help out with patients as well. So it's become a reality. Our relationship is now the way I think it's the way it's going to be forever, isn't it? It's no longer solo practices for both optometrists and ophthalmologists.
Yeah, and there are always exceptions to everything. In Texas, I'm not going to call our biggest enemy, but the leader of the biggest anti-optometry rant in ophthalmology is a 40-year-old. So there's always exceptions, but I agree that it is predominant. I mean, I grew up in the heyday of hatred. Our referral center was started in 1982, and the two ophthalmologists were very interesting. They're kind of like Julio. I mean, in 1982, they didn't want to leave the surgery center. So they were they were mavericks, at that point in time. But it actually is the way. And we may not even have a choice, either of us, at some point, because the manpower studies, you say there's not enough ophthalmologists. The manpower studies are staggering on that. You may be cutting 7 days a week at some point, because the volume of surgical and tertiary care, eye care, is going to do nothing but escalate with our aging population, with our chronically ill population that's getting nothing but worse. All that feeds poor retinal care for the most part. So, somebody has to have a system in place where these patients can be appropriately taken care of. And the days of ophthalmology wanting to do everything, you can't. You simply can't.
Yeah.
And I don't
Nope.
think most want to, like you.
And from ophthalmology standpoint, we're not doing anything about it. So there's no talk about increasing the number of ophthalmologists. There's like zero. There's like no. I don't. I think is mainly motivated probably somebody by this competition myth, right? That they'll be flooded, but yeah, there is no talk about increasing the number of graduating ophthalmologists at all.
Well, and we don't want to get into the future demise of healthcare, but it's not just ophthalmology. I mean, it's all specialty, surgical and tertiary specialty care. We're not increasing the training capacity there. So it's not just eye care that's going to suffer down the road, it's all of it. Um, and that can lead off into a whole path of, is it time to relook at medical education? Because
Yep.
Yeah,
but that's a whole nother discussion that's not to be covered
yeah,
on this podcast.
that's a 10-hour podcast.
Oh yeah. But what that does lead to is a need to be efficient, right? Because if we are, we all agree that we can't meet the demand, right? And I know some practices are listening and going, well, I'm open tomorrow and have plenty of patients, but across the board, we're struggling to meet the demand. So how do we set up, document, collect fees, pay fees? How do we do all that, Joe, in a very efficient manner, so that when we are audited, maybe even the question before that is, when we are audited, what are they looking for? And why is this such a big deal? But then how do we do it efficiently so that I can keep doing what I do, Julio can keep doing what he does, and the patient ultimately isn't burdened by bureaucracy?
Yeah, it's it's very much like we just did a whole training program in PCS in the concepts of diversity, and I'm not going there, but the point is, diversity is not a plan, it's a mindset. And being efficient in relationships is more than a plan. It has to be a mindset. And some of the times, the reasons it doesn't work in some practices is because they truly don't have the mindset that Julio and the other surgeons in that group that I've talked to have. They truly believe this is the way it should work. So it starts with that. Then you're open to developing efficient systems to make it work. So once again, it's not that hard. There are some very simple requirements, that transfer of care, which is actually the terminology. It's not co-management. It's actually a transfer of care, and that's what we're doing. We are transferring our care. We're not really much of anything. Once you transfer the care, that doctor is now responsible for the care, not really the other doctor anymore. But that needs to be in writing. That's what they said. We need a written transfer of care. This is documentation. It's no different than we need to properly document our medical record. We need a documentation that the surgeon says, here, I want Aaron to take care of Mrs. Jones. We need documentation from Mrs. Jones that she wants that. So we need her to document that, yes, I want Dr. Werner to take over my postoperative care. Past that, to be honest with you, the less we can interfere with each other, the better. Because at that point, it's Aaron's responsibility to decide what he charges, and it's Julio's responsibility to decide what he charges. And those should not meet. They could be exactly the same, but it has to be independently your decision. Um, so once that decision's made, we provide the care and we document.
Yeah.
When we say how do we make this efficient, it's just so simple. But you have to have a process in place, and that has to be developed. Someone has to kind of be in charge, which y'all have. Um, and it works beautifully when the systems are all in place.
Yeah, it has to be, like you said, the mindset. And in our clinic, so our clinic has been co-managing since the 80s with Dr. Shanslin. He's like one of the pioneers of like cataract and LASIK co-management. And basically it starts at the door with the receptionist and everybody else. Everybody has to kind of have the same mentality that, that most of the time it's better for the patient to go back to the referring doctor. But yeah, we're all together and we all coordinate, and everybody mentions that this is a possibility if the patient wants it from the minute they walk in the door.
So,
Well, and I agree with Aaron. I mean, it really starts. It really starts with the optometrist. They don't make the decision, but they're the first educator in the process. And I think our job at that point is to state that in most cases, I will probably be providing your post-operative care. The surgeon will make that decision, and if you want that to happen, then I will be seeing you back. So we set the stage, and then from there, everybody just has to carry through with the same message.
Yep.
the Myopia Collective. CooperVision and the AOA have partnered in a groundbreaking initiative to change the way optometrists in the U.S. treat children with myopia. The purpose of the Myopia Collective is to rally the profession of optometry and its allies to interrupt the status quo and elevate the new standard of care for children with myopia. Every individual is encouraged to become a member of the collective. By joining, you commit to taking action to help slow the progression of myopia in children. You'll receive updates and information about the collective and its work in the fight against myopia, gain access to educational opportunities and resources offered by the collective, and hear from change agents, the ambassador optometrists selected to serve as advocates for community and policy change that facilitates the mission of the collective. Scan the QR code or click on the link in the show notes to join the collective today. In the past, our focus revolved around prescribing MacuHealth or MacuHealth Plus to patients at risk of macular degeneration, while also recommending it to collegiate and professional athletes for enhanced contrast sensitivity in sports performance. However, this year's introduction of the Life Meter has been a game changer. The Life Meter revealed a concerning truth. Many of my patients have alarmingly low skin carotenoid levels, indicating potential deficiencies in essential body tissues like the retina and brain. Supported by over 30 peer-reviewed publications, Life Meter's accuracy, consistency, and effectiveness has been demonstrated across 2,000 subjects with diverse backgrounds. With this newfound insight, I can now have meaningful conversations about carotenoid levels with all of my patients, even those who may seem outwardly healthy. To learn more about this empowering technology, feel free to contact your MacuHealth representative or click on the link in the show notes. Together, let's optimize patient care and elevate their well-being. Yep. And there's lots of reasons why it's better. Sometimes it's just convenience. We live closer to where they work or live. Typically, we have a much longer history with the patient. And so I know how to communicate in a way that Miss Jones wants to be communicated with. Mm-hmm. You know, heck, maybe she likes my coffee machine better. Although, Julio, you guys have a pretty damn cool coffee machine.
Yeah, it's the biggest part of our budget.
Yeah, it's a good coffee machine. Yeah. In fact, I tell patients when they go, the first thing they should do is check in, say hi, and turn around and make coffee. But that's all part of the building up trust. So Joe and Julio, I want to throw a couple questions your way because we keep saying it's simple, yet clearly in the industry it's not, or we're really good at complicating the simple. So premium IOLs. right? I should be making a lot more money because the patient gets premium IOLs. How how do we manage those, or what's the correct way of managing a post-operative premium IOL case versus a post-operative standard IOL case? Julio does his job, does the surgery, it's fantastic, beautiful. He transfers the patient care back to me.
You mind if I start? So, with the premium IOLs, it does take a little bit more work, particularly because of the expectations and the post-operative, not complications, but most of these patients will have some kind of post-operative dysphotopsia, or get used to neuroadaptation to the IOL. And if the IOL is not on target perfectly, then they might need extra surgery to make it better. So they do need a little bit more time from either MDs or ODs, and the compensation. I don't exactly know how it ended up being the way it is right now, but basically it is like a standard set, usually about what, 20% or something like that, of the fee goes to the optometrist, and it's warranted because you're going to spend more time with them. You're going to have more chair time with the patient.
So I can tell you where all that came from. Um, CMS was of course, the kind of the one that makes most of these rules, and they're the one that assigned 20% of the surgical fee as dedicated to postoperative management, and that's of all kind of surgery, not just ophthalmic surgery. So that's been in place forever. It did get more complicated with premium IOLs, and when premium IOLs first came out, there were literally no rules, and they were basically considered a non-medically necessary, non-covered product, and therefore there were no rules and no rules applied. So everybody could just pretty much do whatever they wanted to because it was kind of outside the tenets of most of the laws that were out there. But, and I think it was 2006, I'd have to be perfectly sure. It wasn't too long after the first premium IOLs first came out. CMS actually said, yes, this is a separate service, but we consider it to be part of the whole cataract process. Therefore, we are going to allow, on paper, allow ophthalmologist or the surgeon to charge more because it is more. If nothing else, we have to listen to them complain
Yeah,
more.
yeah,
But that's, everything that we do that requires our time and expertise is justified in receiving more money. So the first thing I want to dash is that we're kind of taking advantage of people with all this stuff because we're not. And optometrists are doing the same thing. I mean, when we fit a more complicated contact lens, we don't charge the same as putting them in a daily lens. So we should be appropriately paid for the service and our expertise. And so yes, they cost more. And there is some degree of more care involved in the post-op process, even if it means nothing more than listening to more complaints.
yeah.
Um,
Well, that could be every day for
yeah,
a few weeks. Yeah, I mean, you guys know.
yeah. So there's nothing wrong with making more money for a more complicated service. And CMS sanctioned that about 15 years ago. So now we have the ability to do it, but now we're still back to the simplicity because now Aaron has to set what he determines to be his fee related to the postoperative management of the premium IOL patient. And one thing that is confusing to some people is the ruling stated that you can only charge an additional fee for services that are above and beyond what you're doing for the standard IOL patient. So that's where it gets a little bit tricky because you can't just make this stuff up to some degree. You actually have to go through a thought process of what am I doing extra and what is that worth? Um, but we do that with our contact lenses, we do that with our everything. Um, So once we do that, now we're back to the whole process of how do we get paid. And that was made very clear as well. It's no different than anything else. Collect your own money. Now, we probably will get into some of the nuances of how that can happen legally as well. But we still have to keep in mind the general principle of they expect us to set our own fee and collect our own money.
Hmm.
Whether it's a standard IOL situation, which has a very structured protocol with the 54-55 system, or the premium IOL system, which is kind of more fly by the seat of your pants because there are no established fees for that service.
Correct.
Yep. So you brought it up, so let's jump into it. Because historically, patient pays one time, and then the fees were divvied up, um, and that obviously is a no-no, and I'll ask you why that is. But for the convenience of the patient, are we asking them to write two different checks? Are we asking them to go to two different locations, write a check at Julio's office, write a check when they come to my office? Is there anything that can make that process smoother?
So in our clinic, it's been now probably 15, 20 years. We've been asking the patient to pay the referring doctor separately and at the time they see them. So sometimes we would call the office and have the payment done, but it is still billed by the referring doctor completely separate. And we've been doing that. And I think it actually helps a lot to make it more kosher, so to speak. It just feels better than collecting the money and sending a check now with your name on it to the referring doctor.
Yeah, I think this is where we've said it already. I mean, this really isn't that complicated. And Aaron said we've made it complicated. And some people have made it complicated. Um, so you mentioned the practice in Texas. That's one of only four. There's actually four locations that have gotten stung on this. Um, and every single time it is because they were setting the fee and collecting the money. So some of these nuances, like can I actually, so Dr. Werner has told me I charge $100. Can I actually get a check from the patient made out to him and send it to him since the patient's already sitting here? Well, yeah, that's not addressed in any of these settlements that came out. Can I use a system like Ko-Fi, which is very, very popular? And that one's even easier because it's programmed with everyone's fees and it divvies the money up according to everyone's fees. That works beautifully. But I'm still going to go back to the easiest way is we just do business like we do everything else. And that is I collect my money. And I don't know where the hesitancy came in that. And I know I hear all the time, oh, the patient has to write two checks. Well, number one, nobody writes checks anymore.
Yeah.
And number two, they throw their credit cards around like candy. So it's, the whole concept of I have to collect money twice, I think, is a totally overblown, inconvenience. That's pretty common. So again, there's simple ways to do this. And where we get off into the weeds is starting to debate whether I'm going to go to jail if I collect, or if I run Dr. Werner's, the patient's credit card that is put into Dr. Werner's account, which some people do as well. Well, the point is there's never been a statement on whether that's legal or not legal. And I don't really think that's the weeds that CMS is getting into. I think they're getting off into the basic tenets. Did the surgeon okay it? Did the patient okay it? Did Dr. Werner set his fees? And did he collect his money? And there may be several ways to do that.
Yeah.
So, we just keep going back to it's not that hard, and it's not.
No, we complicate it, like you said.
Yeah. We're ICAP professionals. That's what we do. We take things that are very simple and complicate them, and take things that are very complex and make them simple.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you're wanting to jump off into this point, but it's the perfect lead off into the letter again, which we don't want to harp on the letter, but what got my blood pressure going through the roof on both sides was both ophthalmology and optometry looking at this situation and going, let's just not do it anymore. From the ophthalmologist side, because typically the cited reason is, I'm afraid I'm going to get audited and have to pay one of these multi-million-dollar checks that other people are having to pay. Well, my answer there is no, you won't unless you do it wrong. So no one gets a ticket for driving the speed limit. So I don't know. I think some of them don't want to co-manage, and I don't want to put thoughts into their decisions. And I think they're using the scenario we have going on right now as a reason to say we don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
Then from the optometry side, we hear, well, it's just not worth it. And I think that one made my blood pressure go up more than anything. You know, if I made all my decisions, which I'm not in practice anymore, but if I made all my decisions of whether or not I'm going to provide a service based on the monetary gain, I make the joke, if that's really the decision process they want to go through, they need to cancel their contract with every vision plan that they have.
Yeah. True.
Because they're not worth it. So, it's what am I supposed to be doing for my patient? And we don't always, in some post-operative patients, I saw a lot of them for a long time, and Aaron will attest to this. Sometimes, it's like anything else. Sometimes it's easy, and sometimes the money was easy. And I hate to put it that way, but that's the way it is. Sometimes it's more complicated, and sometimes we're like, man, I lost money on this deal. But it all averages out in the end. And
Yeah.
I just don't believe both, I hate to use the term ethically, but I just don't believe as a doctor I should be making a decision on what services I provide based on the monetary gain. I believe that goes against the oath we all took. So that's my philosophical, podium rant. But I just believe that's what being a doctor is about.
Totally agree. We don't decide that we're going to help people because most of us, that because we're going to get compensated for it. I mean, it's part of the job, right? Because in the end, we got to be compensated. But yeah, like you said, a lot of the times you're seeing a patient if you have a capitated program, you're basically losing money in that end. That's not seen as bad.
No. If I wanted to get into a profession where I just made boatloads of money, I wouldn't have paid to go to optometry school and done this, right?
Any healthcare, right?
No, I make a good living. I'm very happy. I'm very comfortable.
Yeah.
But what I don't make in additional 6-figure, 7-figure incomes that my friends that go into finance make, I get in satisfaction of helping people and knowing that I'm giving back to the community. And so I could make the same rant on fitting multifocals because contact lenses, because we know darn well that there's some people you put them in and it's going to be the bane of our existence for the next 6 months. And
first, sometimes magic happens in the first pair you go on, and they go, "This is wonderful. This is great.
This is great." Yeah.
And walk out the door, and it's like, win.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that I just realized here, and it's Kyle Clutie, Brianna Rue, and I did a Atomic Habits book review not too long ago, and it's the idea of systems came into place. And I think that really all the discussion that I found on this, whether it's I don't want to do it, I don't want to do it wrong, or it's not making me enough money, is I don't want to say no systems, because not having a system is a system. It's just a sucky one. But they haven't been well thought through. Because if you've got a straightforward case and you've got good communication and you know what's happening, post-op care isn't difficult to do. It's pretty quick and efficient.
Yeah.
Right? And so if you were to line up a whole bunch of those back to back to back to back to back, and you were financially motivated, you could make a lot of money just doing post-op care, doing them efficiently.
Yeah.
And I'm not advocating for that, but I think that really that the frustration lies in I don't have a system. I don't know who's collecting the paperwork. I don't have outlined what we're going to do when the patient comes in to visit, yada, yada, yada. And so I think if we all work on our systems, then, as Julio in our office have done in his office, right? I know who's collecting the fees. They know what my fees are. The patients know the process because we've already talked about it. The patient comes back in. My whole team knows exactly what we're going to do, barring something big, which is why we're still managing them post-operatively to make sure everything goes smoothly. It's pretty quick and efficient. And I get to do what I wanted to do to begin with, which is maintain that relationship with the patient, because that's what I value, and that's where primary optometry, I think, really has its strength, right? In taking care of the individual and then the family and the community.
Yeah, and I would say that's probably one of the reasons we get these comments of it's not worth it. And Aaron and I are pretty good about talking about our profession, not always positively, but I can do the same thing with ophthalmology or cardiology or any other as well. We all have our problems, but one of ours is too much optometry ties their worth to time. And if I didn't schedule 30 minutes to do this post-op visit, I'm ripping somebody off because I didn't take enough time. Uh, and when we go into offices to do these on sites and everything, I'm always looking at the schedules. And that's very, very common to see anywhere between 20 and 30 minutes booked out for a simple 2-week post-op. So I contend that the concept that they are not fiscally advantageous is completely wrong. I will contend they're spending too much time with the patient.
Yeah. I think it comes down to what we trained with, right? And what people just get in their heads about what work should be, where you gotta analyze, okay, does this patient really need half an hour to an hour? And then accordingly planning, because we're lucky to live in an era where most eye surgery is pretty uncomplicated post-op. So recovery is very fast. There's very little issues. So much so that, hopefully I don't get replaced by AI in the future, because it really is very uneventful. Not to say that, we're not needed, but most of the time nothing happens, and it's great for everybody.
Yeah.
Well, it's been systematized such to the point
Yes.
that your job is now to make sure the system runs
Right.
as it's supposed to run, as opposed to being the system every step of the way.
Yeah.
And in our clinic, we basically, it's like a standard operating procedure. When somebody new comes in, they're instructed on co-management and what it means and what we do each procedure, and so everybody's kind of trained like they're trained on cleaning equipment. So it's part of the training process for everybody.
Yep. No, I think ultimately we'll finish where we started. Right, it's for the best care of the patient,
Yes.
and the better relationships we both have with the patient, the better relationship we have with each other, right? We take better care of the patient, knowing each other, knowing the idiosyncrasies that we have, and because their outcome is what drives both of us, and ultimately drives the whole process.
Yeah, and I mean, you guys have been seeing some of these patients for 30 years. I see them for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no way I know more than you about the patient.
Yeah.
You definitely know their kids and everything. Yeah.
Well, it's partially the patient relationship, and I said this. Of course, I'll say anything openly, but to be honest with you, if you're dedicating 30 minutes to see a postoperative multifocal IOL patient, you will leave with a litany of complaints, because they're going to sit there long enough that they're going to tell you something's not right about this, and it may be totally ridiculous, but you don't want to ask for trouble. But as you said, there's very few medical complications post-operatively anymore. They exist, and that's why we see the patient. If they didn't exist, we don't have to see them, to be honest. But they do exist, and so that's what we're looking for to a certain degree. Past that, post-operative care is a great deal of hand-holding. And when you have a relationship with a patient, hand-holding's a lot easier. And most of their complaints are going to be vision oriented. And Julio's job is to do a really, really nice piece of surgery. And our job is, even though we've entered into the medical arena of eye care, our job is still, and we're the experts at vision. And so I think we are always in a better position to understand those vision complaints and deal with those vision complaints because that's our expertise. So when you say all this comes down to really what's best for the patient, I make a really bold statement that I think it is best for the patient to be back into their optometrist's office post-operatively.
Totally agree. Totally agree with it. Plus, you guys are nicer. Some of our colleagues are not known for their bedside manner, right? So,
we all have our strengths
Yep.
and
Well,
of opportunity for improvement.
I love it when I run across a really good ophthalmic surgeon that, is kind of a cut up like Aaron and I are. But, I'll be very frank with patients and say, look, you're going to see them for 5 minutes, maybe. This is not going to be a lifetime relationship. And if they don't have, the personality of who, so what? What you really want is somebody that can do a beautiful piece of surgery on you with little complications.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't bother me so much if they come out and go, I don't know, I really didn't get to know him. I didn't see him long enough. I go, yeah, that's the way it's supposed to work.
Yeah, that's the way it is.
Yeah. Nice. Well, I appreciate you both making time for this discussion and look forward to seeing you both in person in March. So Julio, will give a shameless plug for your symposium, your spring symposium. If you're in San Diego area or need a good reason to come to San Diego, not only is it on March 16th, correct?
Yes, March 16th.
And at the Comic-Con Museum.
It's a great
Same
place.
Same place. It's a good place.
It was a hit last time, so it's a good venue.
Yeah.
Great venue, little theater style for
nice
the
education.
And you're right in the heart of
San Diego.
all the comic. Right, in San Diego at Balboa Park, but then all the what's the regala, I'm missing the word here, just like all the cool comic stuff, the costumes and the arts on the walls, and a little area for a good little area for the vendors and good food. So it was a fantastic setup. Joe, you're going to be back lecturing again this year, so I will put the link to that in the show notes.
Thank you.
Yeah, you dressing up again, Julio?
I am, yeah.
Nice.
I'm going to be Wonder Woman. I'm just kidding.
Good time. So if you're in San Diego area, like I said, or need a good reason to come out in March, that will check that out. It's a great event. Get some good education. Right now, there's way too much education available. I don't know if all of it is good, high quality education. A lot of it is set your iPad and walk away nonsense, which is unfortunate because I think that with how fast our healthcare industry is changing and advancements are coming, getting good face-to-face education and collaborating with peers is important.
And then you also get a little bit of time after to kind of enjoy not only the Comic-Con Museum, but if you want to wander around Balboa Park.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good time.
Yeah.
It's a good thing.
So, if you're in the Midwest, there'll be snow. If you're in San Diego, it'll be 72 and sunny.
No rain. So.
Don't jinx us now.
Oh.
Might be one of our 5 days a year we get rain. So, awesome. Well, Joe, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Julio, thank you very much.
You.
Look forward to seeing you both. And any questions, there'll be links in the resource or links in the show notes. Appreciate everyone's time.
Thank you so much.
Thank y'all. See you on spring.
Pleasure. See you.
Hey, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and our YouTube channel, both linked in the show notes. Now, here's something exciting. We're giving away a 1-year subscription to Comprehensive Optometry Simplified. All you have to do is leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, take a screenshot, and email it to me at questions@icodeeducation.com. We'll put that in the show notes as well. We'll be selecting a winner on December 15th. So don't miss your chance to get access to this valuable resource. Thanks again for listening. I can't wait to see your reviews.